Hello, everybody. My name is Felicia Hydera, and this is my presentation on the Renaissance. A brief introduction on the Renaissance is that we read multiple different modules on the Renaissance, and we were taught different information on the Renaissance. We first started off by reading Castiglione, where we learned about sprezzatura and affectation, the differences between those two terms, and his theory on how to be as a person. We also read Erasmus de Copia, where we learned from Erasmus different kinds of things. We learned about Nietzsche and metaphors and how he believes that humans don't really know anything. And he just wrote a paper or he spoke on how to metaphorize things. We also learned about Troilus and Cressida. We learned a lot about how women were metaphorized back in that time and how a woman started a whole war and all that. And yeah. So with the Renaissance rhetoric, we learned through Castiglione, we learned about sprezzatura affectation. Sprezzatura was being nonchalant without trying to be nonchalant, meaning examples are you're just cool naturally. You don't have to try to be cool. He believed that that theory was very well, it was needed. Um Affectation is when you are trying to be cool and it's very obvious, which most in most certain cases people do that. For example, on Instagram, on social media, a lot of people present affectation because they try to be cool, but in reality, we see that you're trying to be cool. Um, there was a quote, an example in the text that Castiglione said. He believes much grace comes from this because everyone knows the difficulties of things that are rare and well done. He's speaking about obtaining or trying to show what sprezzatura is. He believes that it's a difficult task because trying to be cool is hard. Honestly, unless you just have that natural aura about you, trying to do that, you present affectation. We then learned about Baldassare Castiglione. We read his specific book of the Courtier. A brief background summary about him. He was educated in Greek and Latin. He was aristocratic. He helped shape the writing style of rhetoric during the Renaissance times. So specifically with Castiglione, specifically on Erasmus de Copia, we learned about him. He was Dutch. He was a priest, very well educated. He believed that everyone must learn Latin, Greek, and rhetoric. His specific writing style was the plain style. He basically wrote straightforward. He wanted things to be straightforward, very simple, not difficult. He wanted people to understand the plain style. Specifically, he believed all this in our generation or in our current time, the plain style is what's mostly used. Um, the style comes from a diversity of options. So he basically said that you can't choose the best way to say something if you can't think of many different ways to say it. So he wanted people to learn how to write and practice using a dictionary or thesaurus and make sure that you choose the best word to make it relevant. Just don't use different types of words. So on my PowerPoint here, I specifically wrote a quote where he said, Erasmus thought good style need not avoid stylistic ornamentation and rhetorical polish, yet it should remain flexible and adapted to its current uses. So basically, don't use terms that won't apply or won't be used in a good context. Just use the best word possible and keep it plain to define or to express how you feel or like your thoughts on certain things. That's how Erasmus came about it. Next, we learned about the British style manuals. The British style manuals overall were not just about rhetoric specifically. They gave us an ideas on how to be. We saw British style manuals specifically from Thomas Wilson and Henry Peacham. Specifically from Thomas Wilson, he believed that eloquence, which is a book, from rhetoric that comes from God. He wrote his own specifics about that. His book of Peachum gave us not only manuals on how to practice rhetoric, but they leave in very subtle understanding on how to organize society. That's quoted from Dr. Freddie Harris. Some examples are in the Bible. In Peachum, he has many examples in his Bible. Henry Peachum wrote the same style as well. His rhetoric studies he was known for was the Garden of Eloquence. So he used metaphors. He wrote in metaphoric style. He would say, for example, this smells like a lie. A lie doesn't smell. Like if you go into detail and try to see, the lie doesn't specifically smell. So that's a metaphor. Moving on, continuing with metaphors. A figure of speech, a metaphor is a figure of speech is a no, a figure of speech is a word or sentence used in non-literal sense for rhetorical purposes. A metaphor is a figure of speech used to describe or emphasize or just show you on a specific thing. Like for instance, when I just explained how Peachum said this smells like a lie. He used that metaphor to emphasize that, oh, like whatever this person is saying, it's a lie. And it's obvious that it's a lie, but you wanted to show people that it is obvious by emphasizing, by using a metaphor. A person who really expressed and used metaphors a lot was Nietzsche. Nietzsche believed that humans knew very little about language. He believed truths are illusions. So he really used metaphors to express or to speak or to express how his words. So a little background on Nietzsche. He was a German philosopher. He was not from the Renaissance. He was a professor. He was a nihilist. So that's how Nietzsche was. When he wrote The Truth and Lies in Non-Moral Sense, he believed that human arrogance in knowing is very little. He believed that humans think they know it all, but they really don't. He also believed that we focus on things through our perception, and he also believed that literally that truths are illusions. How do you know a horse is a horse? How do you know a horse is supposed to do this? He believes that humans just took a word, put it to something, and made a meaning, but without us really knowing the truth of what it really is. We just titled something and said this is what it is and this is what it's called, but in reality, we really don't know the truth on if it is that or not. He used a quote saying that is to say a unformally valid and binding designation is invented for things, and this legislation of language likewise establishes the first laws of truth. He's basically saying that people just came and named something a mirror. How do you know that a mirror is really a mirror? You just named it, defined it as that, and people took it, and that is what it is. How do you know spoon didn't have a specific name? We just came up with these different things and came up with our own different meanings. That's where he says humans are very arrogant. And that's how he explained in metaphors. Here we have metaphors continued, specifically on another example of Troilus and Cressida. Going through that and reading that, we've seen how Helen, a very beautiful woman pictured here in the pink dress, there was a war around her because of her beauty. They used her as a tool. She was worth a war. A woman was worth a war. She was described to be a gem. She was used as economic value and worth. That's how she was. She wasn't just described as a regular woman. They were using her as economic growth and stuff. Specifically with Troilus and Cressida's issue was that Troilus was chasing after Cressida. And when he was chasing after her, her uncle was trying to sell her like she was just a piece of jewelry to this man. Troilus described her and used her as well. He wanted to get to one thing, and when he did achieve that, Cressida felt unworthy, felt like her virginity was worth something, and it has been taken away from Troilus. So examples in contemporary America, how men and women are metaphorized. Sometimes students around our age use the term or use the sentence, she is looking like a whole meal. They will use that to describe that, wow, like this girl is beautiful, she looks amazing. They will compare this woman to a meal just to describe her beauty, which is strange, but people like it. Going back to Troilus and Cressida, Troilus was trying to get Cressida, and in during that those times how Helen was described, she was described as a tool, something as of trade. When that a woman is a human, they shouldn't be described as something as trade or valued as trade, but they were back in that time. They described men, specifically the Greeks, in Troilus and Cressida. Troilus said the Greeks are strong and skillful to their strength, fierce to their skill, and to their fierceness valiant. That is how he used different metaphors to describe the Greek strength when he was talking to Pandarus. That's a way that men are metaphorized. Um, Moving on. Another other examples that I found online is that mostly men are metaphorized that has to deal with their look, strength, and masculinity. Examples that I found online were he reeks of infidelity or it's raining men. He reeks of infidelity shows how men are generalized in our current society, in our current time, as cheaters, and it's obvious in our society. We would know that specifically, like if someone is cheating, sometimes women can catch on that they are. So that's why that quote could be used in that situation. The second example is stating how there's a lot of men around a certain area or room. A woman may use that, or somebody may use that when it's a lot of men around. For the specific quote, men are the saviors. I believe that men in the sentence, they were being metaphorized in a positive way, but I don't agree with the sentence completely because I believe that women are capable of doing the same exact things that men are capable of doing. I believe that, and it is a proven fact in our society, in our times now, that women can go to war just as men can go to war. Women are in the army, women are in the Marines, just as men are in the Marines. Women are in the same workplaces as men. So, I don't know. I don't really agree with it. Um, Answering further to that question. And to answer the question on how that quote was an example of how that metaphor shapes a particular perception of gender. Yes, some metaphors that are used to trying to define men does shape specific things with genders, because if you say that men are the saviors, you're trying to say that women aren't capable of being the saviors, or why can't they be equal? So some metaphors are extreme when it comes to uh, creating gender roles or trying to separate the both genders. And last but not least, overall, in my answer to this question, how did the Renaissance rhetorics, with their focus on style manuals, shape a particular performance on the self, and how do you see metaphor in Shakespeare in society and shaping the idea of self or society? Overall, the Renaissance rhetorics taught people a lot of different things, different styles on how to speak, on how to describe people, on how women and men were described as, and specifically women were described as something that you could get on the market, something you could purchase. They had a value. They didn't. stuff like that. Overall, the